Welcome back to the Win and In podcast. I'm your host, Max P, and I'm joined by my good friend, Jason, otherwise known as Naestrome. What's going on, Naestrome? How you doing, dude?
Good, man. How you doing? It's been a little while.
It's been a little while, and I think we're both mostly recovered from the Invitational / Steel City Spectacular.
Yep.
It's a good time. I had a lot of fun. There were some good things, there were some bad things, but overall, it was a blast. It was good to see you. We got a chance to play a lot of games in the B&B. One game in the Invitational, and we got to eat a lot of steak. So
couldn't ask for much more this weekend. Maybe a better record, but in terms of the actual experience, things were great.
Yeah, agreed. How'd you make out in the end? I don't remember.
Oh man, I did horribly. I made a meta call that would have paid off if not for the 20-minute cap after time, which I definitely thought I was going to have more room to work with, but that was not the story of this event. And so I had a draw at the end of day one, and that was it. And so I dropped and played some side events day two.
You cracked me up though, because leading up to the event, we talked a lot, and you were kind of floating this really spicy Gretchen list. And you kept going back and forth. I'm going to play Tameshi, I'm going to play Gretchen. I thought you were kind of leaning towards Gretchen, and then you did this whole nope, I'm playing Tameshi. I decided I'm going to play Tameshi. And then as we're walking into the Invitational, you come over to me, you're like, hey Max, I lied. And I was like, what?
Yeah, round one got paired, and I had been telling everybody I was playing Tameshi to just throw him off the sun, written for fun. And then as we're walking to our tables assigned for round one, I lean over to Max and was like, hey Max, I lied. And you're like, what? And I'm like, yep. And then sat down, and it was Gretchen.
Happy. I'm glad you pushed it. I know it didn't work out that great, but you got to take some risks. You can't just do the expected all the time,
Yeah, and I'm glad I did it, and I'd do it again. I think the deck was positioned really well for the meta, not for the format, like the tournament format, which is okay. The name of the game this weekend was Have a Loaded Gun, and a lot of the time that means having it at instant speed. And so Tameshi being limited to only playing at sorcery speed into this field means by the time I'm actually ready to present a win, there's people winning over the top. And so I wanted a deck that could do the same thing, which is one of the reasons I brought Gretchen. Yeah, there is Collector Roof, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, and I'll put on the screen Gretchen just so you can see what Gretchen does, and then we'll talk about it a little bit more in a bit. I brought TNT. I did not do great either. I don't feel like I did that bad. I ended up with 1 win, 4 draws, and 2 losses, which is a lot better than I did last year. And I felt like I played good. It's just luck was just not on my side. And it was hard for me to decide to even play TNT because sure, if you're watching this and you've watched some of the other channels over the last couple months, there's been a ton of people just really talking a lot of stuff about TNT and saying it's not a very good deck and really talking it down. So I was nervous. I was real nervous going into the whole thing. The funny thing is, the day before or the couple days before the tournament, we were in the B&B and we were just jamming all night. And I was losing every game and losing in spectacular ways. What was that first game where you were on Tameshi, NATO was on Tivit, and Tivit's in first seed. Tivit goes turn 1 Smothering Tithe. It goes to your turn, and you clone the Smothering Tithe, and then you both played Fairies, and then someone else played an Esper Sentinel, and then it finally got to my turn, and I'm like what am I supposed to do? It was impossible.
That was wild. It ended with a War of Invention at the end of my turn to go get a Time Sieve for Tivit. And just it was nuts. So And that was kind of the story of the weekend, is everybody was doing incredibly powerful things. And these games ending in stalemates because everybody had loaded guns pointed at each other most of the game, and it just kind of results in you time out at the end of 80 minutes plus the 20-minute extension for turns. And so my round one, that was the story. I had the win at instant speed over the top of everybody else while they were doing their instant speed. And it's round one on a brew, and I'm just sitting there with it, and I'm like, I don't have time to execute this. There's 45 seconds left, and Lily's going for the 3rd instant speed win attempt over the top of my sorcery speed win attempt. And I just, in 30 seconds, can't play the cards fast enough. And so I just sat and we tied it out, and I was like, I'll just keep the info for a later game, thinking that wouldn't be the story of the day, but we saw how many draws there were, and it was just people timing out at the end of the 20 minutes.
A lot of people looked at the draw meta, the quote draw meta of this tournament, and look at it as if we weren't trying to win the game. And I could tell you, people were pushing for wins. Like, people were aggressively trying to win games, every single game. I personally had several games where a draw was offered, and I just told them no, rejected the draw, and then we continued to play and try to push for wins, and it just couldn't happen. My story was the deck was great. Like, I don't feel like Tim Nethrasios was badly positioned in those games at all. I think the biggest problem I had was just bad luck. I had, in my first 3 rounds, I had 8 no land hands. 8, which is just, I mean, what can you do about that? There's nothing I can do. That resulted in my first 3 games being loss, draw, loss, including the game we were in, which is the 3rd game. And that game, I was done from the beginning with that bad mull. And,
I think you went to basically 3 or 4 or something.
Yeah, I went down to 4, and I probably should have went to 3. And the other player, Garset, Jacob Min, was also in kind of a low mull and bad situation. And it was basically a 1v1, you versus a Blue Farm player in first seat who just got out to an outrageous start.
Oh, yeah. I mean, his start was literally turn 1, Tutor, turn 2, Rhystic, turn 3, Smothering Tithe, turn 4, Cavern, Grand Abolisher, Tutor, win. Like, we can't do a whole lot about that. And you had the Force Will back up in case there was a Mind Break Trap hardcast or anything.
Right.
So sometimes those happen.
It just happens. In my game 1, like, you'll laugh at this, I was playing against 2 Blue Farm decks and Kinnan, which is, pretty typical meta for what was there. Kinnan won on turn 2, and their hand was land, Springleaf Drum, Basalt Monolith, Force of Will, blue card backup, and Invasion of Ikoria. So it was like, what are you supposed to do with that? Like, their draw for turn was a Sol Ring. I mean, they had the nuts, and I had to mold a 4, and it wasn't a bad 4 actually, but I mean, there's nothing you can do about that. So it's just that happens.
And that sounded to be sort of the theme for the weekend for everybody. Was if there was a win in the pod, it was a decisive win a lot of the time. I think there were a couple of players that had some grindy games that ended. I know my round 4 in day 1, I think into Shauna, she ended up having a win over the top in her Malcolm Pettis deck. And then I think Isaac had some sort of crazy win as well. But a lot of the time, the players that actually found wins in games were with pretty early decisive wins that people just couldn't stop. You rarely had games go past turn 3 or 4 where there was a winner. Usually those ended up drawing, not for lack of trying, but just the sheer number of game actions and amount of interaction that people were able to put up in the face of these longer games just made it impossible to push a win through.
Yeah. And there's a lot of controversy right now about all of this, and I want to take at least a few minutes to address some of it. I'll start off with this. First of all, the Invitational is kind of a privilege. I mean, the fact that the circuit even exists and that we can go and grind and accumulate points and go participate in a free event with $15,000 worth of prizes is, I mean, that's pretty cool privilege by itself. So, are there criticisms that we have? Absolutely. But I want to sort of ground that in saying that, it's still a free event. It's still, very much appreciated that we even get to participate at all. The fact that it's a free event means we can only complain so much. However, having said that, some of the issues that I had, you tell me if you had the same ones or different ones, but the first one is this was supposed to be enforced at Pro REL, which is a pretty significant difference, from Comp REL. And it was not. It was definitely enforced at a Comp REL level and not Pro REL, which I was disappointed with.
So I got to talk to some of the people at Excalibur, which was the tournament organizer for the Open.
Right.
They had their big 20K event. They had over 500 players that ended up playing in that event. That event was hosted for the Open, and then Top Deck contracted with Excalibur to have space at the event to run the Invitational. So Excalibur did not run the Invitational themselves. They were just the venue that Top Deck rented space from to run, which then means it wasn't Excalibur who ran the Invitational, it was
right.
Top Deck. So some things got stuck in the weeds, whatever that might have looked like. What that means is the Invitational was effectively a side event of the big Steel City Spectacular large weekend event. And it definitely felt like a side event when we got into the games.
Yeah,
we were in a section that was roped off, which was kind of cool. We were by the concessions. It was right next to the open, so close enough by that some of the judge staff could come over, people could come over and watch games from behind the ropes, things like that. The challenge is we had some judge staff that had openly admitted they had not really done Pro REL previously. They were the judge staff that were given for the Invitational because it was a top deck event, and Excalibur needed to keep their judges for their events and the things that they had stakes in and had personally invested in, making sure their events ran smoothly for their event. The Invitational, although it's the premier cEDH event for the year, wasn't their event. So the challenge that I think we ended up facing is big, well, from last year, the event that was run, Pro REL, top of the line, judge staff, premier event, lots of different things that we got opportunities to do. And I think this year felt a little bit more like an afterthought, which kind of points to the quality of the event from last year. And so this was, I think, sort of the other end of the spectrum, where yes, it's a free event. Yes, it was for quite a bit of money, which was great. But I think it's also a big push for Top Deck and their software is the invitational circuit is something that shops really see numbers. People come out in droves if they see it's a bronze or a silver or gold event. That pulls players to show up at your events. Doesn't matter if your pricing is way better. If it's not in a Top Deck circuit, you might not have people show up. They'll go to a smaller event with worse pricing so they can get points for this invitational.
Right.
And I think after this year, the prestige of the invitational event is a little bit diminished. You might not see that be as much of a push in the future.
Yeah, it affects a lot of people who are a little bit exhausted, I think, with chasing the invitational from last year and are really kind of reevaluating if this is what they want to do again. I think ultimately people are going to go after it again, but it's that there was definitely, like you said, a little bit of prestige lost. You know, the other problem was the pod construction, and people have made a lot about this. I don't have as much of a problem with it, I think, as other people did, but it was definitely an issue. And that is Logan from Critical EDH had a baby shortly before the event started, which is congratulations, fantastic. And initially he thought he was going to have the baby during the weekend of the event. He had the baby a bit early, so he was able to attend the event after all, after saying he wasn't going to be able to, which I totally respect. And I could tell you as a father, when you have a newborn baby, you have to be happy too. Like, you have the opportunity to go to an event like this, you will and you should go to that event and enjoy it. And, you know, that lets you be happy as a parent, which is what you need. Like, you don't want to be in a situation where you're in a hole with that baby and you can never get out. So, like, people gave him some criticism for even attending the event. Those people are wrong. Like, attending the event was great. The problem with it, however, was that it went from 64 players to 65 players with him being added, which meant there were going to be three pods in every round, which somewhat scuffs the event to some degree. Now, understand that if someone were to be DQ'd, if someone were to no-show, if any of those things were to happen, then you'd also be in an awkward number situation in that scenario, which is what happened last year. We had people who got DQ'd and we ended up with 3 pods last year. My thought would have been, why not add, 3 players to go up to 68? That way you have even pods again. And I think in the future it would make sense to have alternates available up to the time the event starts so that you can add players in to make things even in the future. But they didn't do that. It didn't work out that way. We ended up with 3 pods every round, and that was somewhat troublesome for some people, especially people like Shauna, who was on Malcolm Kedis. So that actually impacts her ability to do well because now Kedis isn't triggering as much. So, all of that was also a factor.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you'll see, like, Atali was a deck that showed up, and if you're in a 3-pod with Atali, that is a third of your win condition that is no longer there. I guess a fourth. And so it really does make a difference, and I think people structure their decks around the 4-player pod structure. And so if you get an unfortunate circumstance in round 1, and then now you're in a 3-pod in round 2, there were multiple people that played 3 pods all day. Day 1, they played 4 or 5 rounds in 3-person pods. Which at the premier cEDH event for the year should not be a thing that happens. I think the idea was floated to move it up to 68, and what I understand, that got shot down for some reason, whether it's logistics or what have you. But I think there's definitely got to be measures in place for next year to ensure that the event fires as intended, as advertised, with 64 players. I know there was some controversy with doing the voting again this year. It was said it wasn't going to be done, and then it kind of came back. I think as of right now, it's not going to happen next year with the voting. I think the voting's great. I think you do it a little differently, where you don't have the eBay sniping method, and it kind of creates some feels bad moments for people. But
yeah, I agree. I mean, on the one hand, it does create a lot of money for charity, which is cool. But on the other hand, like, I think we want a crisp event. I think that's more important. I will say that I have heard from Top Deck, leading up to the event and after the event, that they understand that it was a little bit substandard for what they wanted. And I think that really has to do with all of the drama where things kind of fell apart after the Invitational last year. So they kind of took their hands off of things for most of the year, and then only kind of bought back in towards the end and tried to have it be a good event after all. And because of that, I think it fell a little short. I still had a blast, by the way. I still had a really good time, even in the event.
I mean, and this was something I said at most of the rounds, is I was like, all of the games I've had, the people have been very pleasant. The level of play has been really high. I'm not having fun. And I think that was more from a gameplay perspective and from like kind of where the tournament format was at for the highest level, where everybody's pretty proficient in politicking. You have few play mistakes and mulligan decisions. Everybody kind of has it in terms of interaction or the win. It creates these awkward kind of concentrated game states where everybody knows what to do, and it really makes it hard to finish games in time. But I think it was also a testament to, despite the Invitational kind of feeling lackluster this year, the Open and just the Steel City weekend in general clearly shows that cEDH is alive and well and has really exploded in popularity. We had people that kind of showed up because it was a local event. You had people getting interested from just their friends going, and this is their first big event. And this is in the middle of, not middle, but it's in downtown Pittsburgh, and it was an event that's not the easiest to get to. Finding hotels and Airbnbs and things isn't always the most cost effective, and you had over 500 people show up. I think cEDH is alive and well. The Top Deck circuit has been great, and I hope to see it continue to do the things that it's done previously, and we see it improve on itself and iterate. But I don't know if cEDH needs it. I think it's kind of growing out of that circuit style for right now.
Yeah, I think cEDH is doing great, and I'm a little bit annoyed where there's this whole sort of public outcry and feeling that the Invitational was ruined and terrible and miserable and awful, and I don't think that's the case. I think it was not what it should have been, but it was still a great event, and you combine it with what Steel City was, the Open. I mean, it was the greatest cEDH event ever, all put together. It was certainly not a failed event by any stretch of the imagination. These ideas that cEDH is somehow dying or ruined is just complete nonsense. So it was good.
Yeah, and I think seeing Excalibur's response to the events that were occurring and some of the things that they got reports of during the event itself were really great. I know Brittany and Baldy especially went out of their way to make sure that any whisper they got of people being frustrated by something that was within their control, they made sure to try and address. They're making a push for some other big events. This is not the last 500-person cEDH event I think we'll see from them. And so I'm excited to see more TOs really take initiative to get these bigger, large-scale, almost Grand Prix style events happening. And so I know there's some coming up sometime around Thanksgiving. There's a few others earlier. I don't know if you're going to the cookout. I won't be there.
I can't go either. Yeah, there's a lot of big events coming up, though. You mentioned the cookout down in Atlanta. It's probably going to be another 300-person event plus. Right, we've got the Fishbowl 6 coming up in end of October out in San Diego. That's also going to be like a 300-plus person event. And then we have the Frenzy at the Falls is the big Excalibur event that's coming up. Like you said, in November. It's Thanksgiving weekend. I can't go to that. I can't go to the cookout, unfortunately, just because of timing. But that's going to be another close to 500-person or over 500-person event up in Buffalo, New York, near Niagara Falls. So
I'm hoping to make it out to that one. The timing of that being Thanksgiving weekend can be a little awkward. Thankfully, my wife and I are in a field where we have that holiday time off. I know not every Magic player has the ability to take those blackout weekends. But one of the things we're hoping to see is maybe we can get a group out, because that's a cool area to do a Magic event.
Oh yeah.
The weekend's a little tricky, but
I'm so sad that I can't go. I actually have the weekend off, but like the whole family, and I mean the whole family. So my wife's sister, my wife's brother, and their kids, and everyone, we're all going down to Disney World. So I'll be I'll be full dad mode instead of cEDH mode that weekend.
Yeah, and we'll see where the format's at that point. We have some releases coming up that might shake some things up, hopefully. But I think the format itself, we're going to be here for a little while. I hear 2026 is kind of when we should expect some changes to the format, if any at all. But I think this fall, and especially into the winter, people are going to have to get ready for some pretty comprehensive cEDH decks that are well streamlined and execute either very quickly or try and draw the game out and find an opening. So we'll see what this looks like.
I've got a bit of a conversation going on Twitter right now, so if you're watching this, go check out what I'm trying to start a conversation about and just talk through, like, okay, where are we as a format right now? We had the huge ban back in September. We got the little unban of Gifts Ungiven more recently. What do we do? How healthy is the format? What's broken? What's not? Yeah, go ahead.
Ban Rhystic Study. I think that is the solution. I know, Max, you and I have talked about this. Conditional draw effects like Rhystic Study, Mystic Remora are very, very hard to interact with and skew the game to a significant level. Rhystic Study is the only unconditional contingent draw engine. And so what this means is you pay 3 mana, and that sits there until somebody removes it or counters it or pays the 1, which will not happen because cEDH is a tempo game, and when you're playing from a lower seat position, you can't afford to respect and pay the 1 because you're going to get further behind.
Yeah, I understand. I understand the argument for it. Like, I get it. I understand the argument for it. What I'm trying to figure out, though, is just, okay, what do we want the game to look like? I'm not even talking about, like, okay, what the most problematic card is. But what do we want the game of cEDH to look like? Because if you go back to last year, right before Invitational, we were in this meta space where everyone called it turn order simulator.
Yep.
Where you'd have these games where if you were in 4th seat, you never got a turn 2. It just wouldn't happen. The game was consistently over on turn 2 or turn 3 at the latest. And it was super fast around Dockside, Mana Crypt, Jeweled Lotus. So those effects really accelerated the game, and especially around Rogside. And the thing was, the more the game got fast, the more people played fast decks, which made the game faster, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know that that's where we want to be. I don't think we want to be in a place where a good portion of your games, you have no gameplay, you have no agency, you don't get to meaningfully play the game at all. I don't think that's what we want. But on the other side of that, we've gotten to this place where if the game goes to turn 4, and specifically I think turn 4 is where it all seems to fall apart, you have a consistent problem where you have not 1, not 2, but 3 Rhystic Studies, Smothering Tithe, more draw engines, all in play. You have all of these flash effects in the decks, and you run into this game state where nobody can do anything without drawing their opponent's cards and giving them resources, right? And that game bogs down, becomes an incredible slop fest where no one can win. Where it's just too difficult to go from that position to somehow push through to a win in a reasonable time frame, right? That's why we're seeing the 11-hour game. That's why we're seeing regularly you have top 16 and top 4 games that go 3, 4, 5 hours because that slop game comes into existence and no one can push through. That's also a problem.
Yeah.
We need to, like, ideally, we want to avoid both those situations. We want games where it gets complex, it gets interesting, everyone gets to do some things, but then at some point, someone is able to push through and actually win a game.
Yeah.
And
I think, I think Rhystic Study is the driving factor. So, reason being is right now, everybody has a way to get it, or they have a way to beat it. Whether that's a Rogthra strategy, we're making more mana than you reasonably need to be able to generate mana to push through a Rhystic Study early until you can present your win and it's too late. But what I think that card specifically does is it creates that slot fest that you're talking about, where it's not a Rhystic Study hits the board, and now that player is going to get fed cards while the Turbo player tries to win, and they eventually draw interaction and stop them. They will either get raced, and they won't draw the interaction, and the Turbo deck wins, or they do, and then they win. And that doesn't create a positive play experience on either end, either from just a gameplay perspective or from a competitive perspective. This is a card that fundamentally either doesn't do anything and you lose anyway, or warps the game around it and takes over the win. When you get people running multiple enchantment clones, I'm guilty of this. My deck preys on this a ton, and you're cloning this card, it's because it's the only viable way for you to continue to win through it. You can't play other things that might have better opportunities. Stacks can't exist when Rhystic Study is an effective card in the format. And so what I think we'll see if Rhystic were to get banned is, yes, a short return to Turbo, where you're going to see those decks pop through and they're going to not have to worry about feeding a player interaction, and they're just going to be able to jam. That will pop up. The thing that will stop those decks from functioning effectively are control and stacks decks. And often they're one and the same. Talion, I think, is a perfect example of that. You have your Grafdigger's Cages, you have your Weathered Runestones, you have these effects that prevent your opponents from doing those things quickly, and they're going to make a resurgence. You'll see Winota come back. You may see Timnatana. You'll get some interesting play dynamics where they're playing permanents that disrupt your opponent's game plan and they can't win through, so they have to remove it. Then removal comes back into play, and you'll start to see that to offset some of those stack strategies. And that's where you have your mid-range decks take advantage, where they've got lots of meaningless permanents. Your Thrasios decks will start to take prevalence again because they're not getting run over by the Turbo decks, and they eat alive the stacks decks that you've got a Collector Roof. Cool, I'm going to tap my Cradle for 4 and activate it and start generating advantage to pull ahead. Rhystic Study is the equalizer in those events. The stacked player is never going to be able to lock the board down and deny resources when every game action is resulting in your opponents getting more resources. And so you'll still have some. Mystic Remora will still exist. You'll still have Smothering Tithe. But Mystic Remora dies eventually. It's not on every spell. It's on non-creature spells. You'll have strategies that won't feed it. Smothering Tithe makes you as many treasures as it does. It's because everybody's drawing so many cards. And so when you see that Rhystic Study goes away, which I think it's inevitable at this point, you're going to see the format equalize a little bit. You won't have a card that's as broken at making mana like Dockside, or a card that's as broken at drawing cards like Rhystic Study. And I think with those two things out of the format, you have powerful effects, but not things that fundamentally warp the form.
See, I have a working theory, a working idea that I think would be better than just outright banning Rhystic. Even though, like, I recognize that what I'm going to say is probably impossible, and it just can't be implemented the way I want to. But in my mind, the problem with banning Rhystic Study is you have a lot of decks that can't reasonably create draw effects without Rhystic Study, because they don't have draw effects in the command zone. So I think when you ban Rhystic Study, you inevitably give a lot of power to decks who have commanders in the command zone that says draw a card. Right. So my theory is you can have Rhystic Study in decks so long as the commander doesn't say draw a card. So if you are running Timna Crom, you can't run Rhystic Study in your 99 or 98. If you're running Thrasios, which also says draw a card, no Rhystic Study. But if you're running a commander that doesn't say draw a card, that does other things, Yuriko, for example, you can run Rhystic Study.
What about Tivit, where it says make a clue? Doesn't say draw a card.
Does not say draw a card. So I would allow Rhystic Study in a Tivit deck, right? Because Tivit doesn't have inherent card advantage until you get your giant commander into play. So, you're at an insane disadvantage with that deck if you don't bring back, Mana Crypt and Jewel Lotus, and you just ban Rhystic Study, then any Timna deck just has a huge advantage over a deck like Tivit that doesn't have inherent draw. So
yeah, I think you're onto something with, there are some commanders that become fundamentally too powerful if you don't have inherently powerful cards like Rhystic Study in the format. I think we saw that a little bit with Dockside getting banned. There were some strategies that were kept alive because Dockside was a card in the format. Dargo, in non-Timna Dargo shells, has kind of fallen off the face of the earth. You've got a couple of people championing that deck and trying to really push through Dargo, but that's a strategy you don't see much anymore. Korvold is another one where, sure, you may have some pilots that put up a result every now and then, but we did also see a swing in the other direction with more commander decks that did have more options. You saw non-red decks start to push the format a little bit more. Rograk Thrasios was not really a deck pre-Invitational. You had a bunch of other strategies that were taking over. We saw Dockside get banned, and that's a deck that adapted and found more ways to win the game. Oboro Breezecaller wasn't a card that was on people's radar until like February of this year. And so we're really starting to see like there's still these older cards that are starting to pop into popularity a little bit more. And I think that's what we'll see with Rhystic Study. Tymna's going to be great. That's a card that people are talking about not being allowed in the format anymore. And I think that's an effect in a different conversation, but drawing cards is way too powerful, and Rhystic Study is by far the best method at getting those cards.
I'm just at the end of the day, I'm very ban adverse. Like I don't like to ban things. I think I'd much rather print cards that mitigate the problems. And I do think that there's a possibility that some of that is on the way as well. You look at cards like Spider-Punk, for example, right? Cards that let you force through wins even if there's a Rhystic Study in play. In low colors, right? You saw Shadow, right? With the split second, we saw Redirect Lightning as a mono red, effectively a counterspell and a redirect. So that's these are powerful effects that do help you win the game. So I'm hoping that even if Rhystic Study doesn't get banned in the near term, we'll see some of those cards take effect and allow people to win more.
I think from a tournament format perspective is the other argument for Rhystic Study getting banned. Similarly to Sensei's Divining Top and Legacy. My round 1, we had no slow play. In my round 4, we had no slow play. People were playing quickly and efficiently. Politics were short and sweet. The sheer number of the sheer amount of time and triggers put on the stack from cards like Rhystic Study, and not like Rhystic Study, Rhystic Study, and clones of Rhystic Study. There were 3 in play at one point. Just the sheer number of triggered abilities that get put on the stack take up so much time to resolve as you get these 30, 40 individual stack battles that happen where you're trying to resolve triggers. People are responding to Rhystic Study triggers to avoid them getting another card, to potentially see another counterspell to force their win through. And by the time the stack clears and they're able to put their win on the stack, you're out of time. And I think that's something that, yes, you might get with a Mystic Remora from time to time, but Rhystic Study is every spell, every turn, all the time. There's some piece of game action that has to happen every time. And from a tournament health perspective, that's not good either, whether or not it's competitively viable. Yep. And so I have a hard time hearing an argument for why Rhystic Study is okay. Like, what is it providing to EDH besides just being grandfathered in? Dockside had the same argument. It was too important, and we've lost it, and the format's been okay. And I think Rhystic Study is another card we could lose, and people would look back on it and say, we probably should have gotten rid of that sooner.
Yeah, it's interesting because my round 2 of the Invitational, a TNT player, Alan, I hate you. I hate you. I'll always hate you forever. I don't really hate you, but he played a card called Heartwood Storyteller. And if you don't know what Heartwood Storyteller, it's a green and 2. It's a creature, and it says that whenever a player casts a non-creature spell, each other player draws a card. Right? Which is, interestingly enough, exactly the problem that we're experiencing, right? Because you end up in this state of things where anytime anyone at the table takes a game action, everyone's drawing cards because everyone has a Rhystic Study. And then you combine that with Smothering Tithe and everything else. So now not only are you, every single game action yielding a card for every player, it's also yielding treasures. Soon we're going to have the Cabbage Merchant. So it's going to yield additional mana availability. It's a mess. It becomes a slop mess that no one can win through. And that's exactly what happened with the Heartwood Storyteller. It was exactly that. Everyone had 40 cards in hand. I pushed my ass off. I mean, I really, really tried to push through all of that, and it just was impossible. By the end of the game, they're like, listen, time is up. We're at time. We're in the 20-minute time period. Do we really need to sit here? Here's 14 counterspells. And they just laid them out on the table in front of me. And the next guy laid out 7 counterspells, and the other guy laid out another 10. And I'm like, okay, I guess it's a draw. Because what am I supposed to do?
Yeah, because even if you can figure out who's going to win that game, you can't do it in 20 minutes. There's no way.
No, exactly. Even if I work through every single one of them, I'm like, okay, I can do this, I can do that, and I'll be able to work through this. 20 minutes isn't enough time to work through all of that stuff. It's impossible. And everyone's still drawing cards, by the way, because that storyteller's still there.
Yep.
right? Where the Rhystic studies are all still there. So it is a significant problem. I still don't like talking about bans, but I think that no matter what we do, right? No matter what we do, if we want to get away from that particular situation and that particular problem, you either need to print some magical card that destroys all Rhystic studies easily, at split second with them not drawing cards, or you might have to ban Rhystic study. I don't know what to tell you.
And I mean, you get into the philosophy side of EDH where they don't really like printing resource denial cards already anyway. You'll see these taxing effects like Rhystic Study and other things that may come out, but you won't necessarily see more of the, hey, you can't draw cards anymore. We saw Hull Breacher get banned. Notion Thief doesn't really see a whole lot of play, but people, especially in casual Commander, really don't like it when they can't actually play their game. And so printing the cards that prevent them from playing their game is something that Wizards typically tries not to do.
Yeah, which I think would be better off if they did. It would create another dynamic and paradigm within the game that would be better for everybody, but I don't think they're going to do it either. And frankly, I'm concerned about whether or not they'll do anything. Anyone will do anything to impact the format right now, at least until next April is when, or I guess theoretically what they said was not the rest of this year. So it's possible that the panel comes back in January and makes some changes. I hear over and over and over again, to the point where it's driving me crazy, where people are like, make draws with 0 points, make draws worth -1 point, make wins worth more. There's all these suggestions about changing the point structure to somehow impact the draw situation. Or I hear people saying, just win. You should refuse the draw and just win. And guys, you do not understand what's happening. None of those things are real options. I went into multiple games over the weekend where I put a turn 2 win on the stack, right? Put that turn 2 win on the stack, and someone had one piece of interaction to stop me. And that game quickly mutated with, like you said, all the Rhystic studies came down, and no one could win the game. You just literally couldn't win the game. The only way to win the game at that point is for the other 3 players in the pod to be like, you know what? You have a nice beard. I like your beard. Go ahead and win. I mean, that's literally the only way that these games were going to end in wins. Yeah, it just wasn't going to happen. And I think, if you take away the option to draw, that's exactly what you end up with. You end up with people king making on purpose, where you're like, well, a draw sucks here. It's worse for me than losing. So, let's figure out who we want to give a win to.
Yep.
And that's not competitive Commander. That's not a competitive situation. That's not what we want.
No. And I think there's another argument to that too, because at one point I had said I think it would be better for creating intentional draw scenarios to be something you can't do that would result in effectively collusion, offering outside money where you would get disqualified from the event. But then it was pointed out that you can then say, hey, opponent who has interaction that can stop me from winning the game and cannot win themselves, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do with the sequence of game actions. I'm going to create infinite mana. I'm going to tutor Fairy Mastermind. I'm going to generate Infinite Storm. I'm going to cast Brain Freeze and target all of us 300,000 times, so all of us have empty libraries. Then I'm going to activate Fairy Mastermind while none of us have a card in our deck. That is a draw that is taken purely with game actions and results in a draw. And so it's a forced draw, but you are not offering them anything. You're just telling them what sequence of game actions you're planning to take, and then they get to decide whether or not to use interaction to stop you. Can you lie to them? Sure. But people will catch on that you can actually force draws without intentionally getting your opponents to agree to stop taking game actions. You just stand up and walk away from the table. You can do it with real game actions. So there's no way to police the language around it.
Yeah, it just doesn't. There's just no way around it. It just doesn't work. I had situations over the weekend where I refused draws, where I said, you know what? King make one of us. Choose one of us to win. And then it still didn't work out. It still ended up in a draw, even after I did that, because the game progresses. People have more interaction. People have more things they can do, and you still can't win. Even after you king make someone, they still can't win the game, and it still ends up in a draw. It's just the nature of the game. And the only way that you're going to fix this is by changing either the nature of the game itself, right? What it takes to win the game, or you could do things where you change the card pool. And that's really the only thing that you could do to affect less draws, period.
Yeah. And that one solution that I've talked about a little bit, which may help with the draw disparity and the win disparity with seat position, is changing some of the math on what a draw gets you. So we've already talked through, you can't get 0 points for a draw. You can't make it the same as a loss. It's going to create the weird king-making scenarios. You can't manipulate the point values for winning and losing necessarily to try and manipulate how valuable a draw is. What Top Deck has shown they can already do with their software is manipulate the breaker math for a win or a loss or a draw. And so what I think you do, and I don't know how the code would work for this and what it would take to get this to happen, but you manipulate what the breaker math looks like if you take a draw from 4th seat versus 1st. So if you are in 1st seat and you lose, your breaker should get worse than if you are in 4th seat and you lose. Or if you are in 4th seat and you draw, your breaker should get better than if you're in 1st seat and you draw. And so it doesn't just take in your opponent's match win percentage, but it also takes into account what your seat position is. That way, when you get to the end of your 7-round event, the player who got, and this was an issue with the Invitational, the player who finished all those 7 rounds with 11 points, with 2 wins and a draw, they missed the top cut to people who got 1 win and 6 draws because their opponent match win percentage was higher. But your wins should matter more than your draws do.
Right.
And I think also your win path should matter more than your record does. And so if you are somebody that has 11 points and of your 2 wins, you won in 3rd and 4th seat, your breakers should be better for winning in 3rd and 4th seat than they are for winning in 1st and 2nd. And so you should be seated higher accordingly. Because everybody knows going 1st and 2nd is way better than going 4th or 3rd for that matter. And so I think if you can find a way to make that nuance change happen, somebody in 4th seat is way more likely to want to take a draw because they're less likely to win the game already anyway. And somebody in 1st seat is going to be way less likely to want to take the draw, even if they have a better record, because they might miss out on breakers where, hey, 17's the lock for this event. Okay, but if you've had a really good win path all the way up, you've been going 1st and 2nd a whole lot, you're in 2nd seat in round 7, and you need a draw to lock the top cut,
you're in trouble.
You might miss.
Yeah, you're in
and so
trouble.
You might have to win. And I think it gets really interesting, and that's an easy way to mitigate the draw factor because it's less predictable that it's going to lock you for the top cut because you can't do breaker math on the fly. It's like the hardest thing.
And by the way,
so I think it'll help.
Yeah, and by the way, just to key on what you said earlier, yes, he said that correctly. A lot of people are going, wait, did he just say that people made top 16 in the Invitational with 1 win and 6 draws over someone who had 2 wins and 1 draw? Yes, that actually happened.
Twice.
Yeah, that actually happened. And fortunately, there's a pretty easy fix for that problem, regardless of all this other math. And that's just simply you make wins worth as many rounds as you have in the tournament, right? So if you have a 7-round tournament, if wins are worth 7 points, then it's impossible for anyone to get ahead of more wins with less wins, period. Right, which is what they did, by the way, in Portugal when I went to Lisbon for the European Championship. That's an easy change to make, but yes, yeah, that was kind of messed up. You know, poor Pigeon, who got 2 wins, missed top cut because players had enough draws to outpoint it. Which is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, and they had the same record too, so their breakers were just better because they had fewer losses than Pigeon did, which. In a 1 versus 1 magic system makes sense. But in a multiplayer format where you are winning 25% of your games instead of 50% of your games on average, it doesn't work that way. And so you have to change the breaker math accordingly. And so I think that was a little wild. Also, that's probably the only tournament structure piece to take away from that event in terms of competitive cEDH events.
Right, to change in terms of actually changing things,
Yeah, that's maybe the only one you take from that event. We definitely don't want to have the restarting the round with a forced draw.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, from the European event. It's interesting. I don't think the restarts are as bad as people think they are. I think that they're problematic in untimed rounds, but in timed rounds, I don't think they're as bad. It would be better. Like, it's an interesting theory. Like, if you get into these games like Heartwood storyteller games where everyone has a Rhystic Study and everyone's drawing a million cards, and it becomes very obvious pretty early on that no one's winning the game, I think it's reasonable for us to say, hey, this isn't going to work out. Let's restart. I think, and everyone agrees to it. I think I'm okay with it. I know everyone's going to go crazy. Max, you're an idiot, but I'm telling you, I think it's better. I think it's better.
So I'm going to have you entertain this world. I know we've had the Rhystic Study conversation. Imagine a world where at the end of your game, maybe even before the 80-minute round timer is up, everybody's had a chance to push their win, and one player actually pushes it through and wins the game. And this is a world where people generated their resources, they used their commanders to function as the engine or the outlet in some capacity, and they built their decks around their commanders and had other systems and methods of winning the game. This picture I'm painting you is a world without Rhystic Study in it. This is a world where you have people building decks. You're going to see Derevi come back. You'll see some cool decks that get to do really cool things because they're not worried about playing around the most powerful card in the format. And I think all of these issues with tournament structure, where we have the 11-hour game, we have some of the other crazy things, the game restarts, stuff like that, those won't happen anymore because there just won't be the sheer number of game actions in the puzzle to figure out how to win through this insane stack battle.
They'll become very rare, put it that way. There will be occasionally you'll have a game
of course,
where you have Remoras, right? And it happens. But most of the time, I think you're right. Rhystic Study not being there means most of those games go away. Right.
And I think the question then becomes, what do they look like? And is that better than what's happening? I am 95% sure that the answer to that's going to be yes, they are going to be better. But we'd have to see what it looks like. So what I'm going to do is all the decks that I enjoy playing, I'm going to make versions that don't have Rhystic Study in them, and that they're skewed to play against other decks that don't have access to Rhystic Study, and just see what the format might look like. See if I can get some friends to play a pod and just try it out and see if it's similar to the cEDH that we've been used to playing before the format became solved, so to speak. And I think it'll be a really interesting play experience. I think you're going to see some cool strategies pop back up.
Do you think that they should unban Jeweled Lotus and Mana Crypt?
Jeweled Lotus, yes. I think that got hit for casual players, which is okay. It's a cool card. This is literally the only format that you can play it in where it does anything. Mana Crypt you can play in Vintage or Cube or whatever. Jeweled Lotus literally doesn't work anywhere else. So give us that back. It's fun. I can be trusted with Jeweled Lotus and Tameshi. It'll be fine. But Mana Crypt is good. I don't know if it's necessary. It's powerful in a world without Dockside and Rhystic Study. Mana Crypt pushes the envelope pretty far. Soul Ring is already really powerful. I would love to see it come back. I'm gonna pull it up. I've got them here. I'm waiting for the day where they decide, you know what?
Glass in case of
You've
emergency.
had your time out. Come up long enough. There's my Mana Crypt. There's my Jeweled Lotus.
Yep.
They live in the binder.
I've got mine over here too. Absolutely.
And so,
yep.
I'm waiting for it. I think we will see Jeweled Lotus.
I think the thing with Mana Crypt, the more I've thought about it, because I've been really trying to think about each of these cards and what them being in or out of the format mean. I think Mana Crypt accelerates the game by a turn by itself. Just that one card. And what it does is it lets you do, those turns where you go Arcane Signets, you get the 2 mana rocks, you can do those immediately, much more consistently. The fact that you can tutor for Crypt with Enlightened Tutor lets you do all kinds of things that you couldn't do otherwise. Like, it just accelerates the game by a whole turn, just by having that one card available in the right?
Yeah.
And that, I think, is not really what we want. I think.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I think. Jeweled Lotus, on the other hand, Jeweled Lotus has a very interesting effect on the format, which is it allows certain commanders that have really emerged lately, Lumra, Hitali, even Godo, those kind of commanders now become much more playable, and you have that threat of the turn 2 explosive commander, that can just win by itself, right? That becomes a reality, which then impacts the card pool more, which is you've seen people stop playing Drannith Magistrate. All of a sudden, Drannith Magistrate becomes a much more playable card because you really want to have that in your deck and be able to mull for it if you're facing against an Atali deck or a couple Lumras or whatever, right? Which impacts the card pool, which impacts the decks, right? If you take Rhystic Study out of the format, it has much more profound impact than people realize. Smothering Tithe gets worse. Bowmaster gets worse. Tataru gets worse. Fairy Mastermind gets worse. All of these cards.
All the enchantment clones are gone.
All the enchantment clones are gone. It has a much more profound effect than just pulling Rhystic Study out of the deck. It impacts the card quality across the format. It makes other cards better or worse, right? So there's a lot to think about. I'm not at the point where I'm like, yes, do it yet, but I'm getting there. Yep, I am.
I mean, if they give you Jeweled Lotus you get to play Talion again.
I know.
If they ban Rhystic Study, you get to play Talion again.
Right. Absolutely. And then like you think about what's coming, like we're getting, the Cabbage Merchant into Thrasios, all of a sudden becomes, we're talking S tier. Like it goes up a whole level. That deck goes up a whole level because now you have basically a Smothering Tithe that can only be played in green and isn't reliant on card draw. Right? So Rhystic Study goes away. Smothering Tithe gets worse. Cabbage Merchant may be better than Smothering Tithe at that point.
Could be.
Right?
Yeah, you don't lose the Treasures. It's not temporary mana. It's permanent mana as long as the Cabbage Man is in play. It's also an activated ability of the Cabbage Man. He taps your food tokens to make mana. And so you get some cool things with Sisay and Agatha's Soul Cauldron to all of a sudden turn your food online.
I can play Collector Oof in TNT.
I was playing that in Gretchen.
It's not affected by the Cabbage Man, still does his thing, right? So, I'm very curious to what people think. I know a lot of people are really sensitive right now to any conversation about banning anything. Like, I know that there's people right now who are watching this who are pissed that we're even having this conversation. But the reality is like, we have to be open to the conversation. We have to be open to looking at the format honestly and figuring out, like, what can we do to make it better? Like, how can we make this format better? Because, I'm not saying it's bad. I completely love the format. I'm having a blast. I have less of a problem with the draws than I think most people do. I'm okay with them a lot of the time, honestly. And I think I would be okay with a format that's just draw heavy and like wins are harder to get. But I think overall, that's not what we want. And I think we can improve that. We can fix these things. And we need to be able to at least talk about them without everyone losing their minds. And lately, that's all everyone seems to do is anytime we have a conversation about changing something about cEDH, it's like people's hair catch on fire and like the house is burning down and everyone runs around screaming. And it's like, guys, calm down, breathe. cEDH is doing fucking amazing. We had a 513 person event with a 65 person side event at the same time, right? In Pittsburgh. cEDH is doing amazing. All we're looking to do is make it even better. We're just having the conversation. No one's changing anything right now. We're just talking about what we could do and what the impacts would be. It's all calm down, relax.
And I think too, like the people who are the loudest are us, the people who have hundreds of games with the way the format has been. We're playing online constantly, we're playing in person. When we're talking about potentially trying to ban Rhystic Study, this is after, at least for me, thousands of games with this play pattern being in effect and being in pods where people are tutoring for Rhystic Study and making this happen. And so it's not just a couple of tournaments where draws go really long. It's not just a few different situations where I have the win, but we ran out of time. It's lots and lots and lots of games where this is a pervasive play pattern that's been called out as problematic and doesn't feel great to play with. And I think it's okay for us to talk about wanting things to be different and thinking about what that could look like. At the same time, if you're having fun, play with your friends, play in events, play at your local shops. Like, the format's great, and there's a reason why we've been talking about it for an hour on this podcast. It's because we really enjoy playing it.
We love it. I fucking love it. I love playing this game. I'm going to keep loving playing this game. It's fantastic. And like, I know there's a lot of people who, after the bans happened, left the format and they don't play anymore. And they point to these draws and they point to what's going on. It's like, see, this is a terrible format. I don't want to be a part of this. But I'm telling you, like, come back, come play. It's a lot of fun. Like, yeah, it has its problems, but it's always going to have problems. It's a 4-person game. There's always going to be challenges. Don't be afraid to play with us. It's a good time, man. I'm telling you. So, I mean, we could talk about this for like 3 hours, but Jason, I really appreciate you talking about this with me. I know I've been resistant to the whole Rhystic Study ban. I'm still fighting it in my head, but I'm coming around. I'm coming around to it slowly. It's too bad because I have a beautiful prophecy foil Rhystic Study, but you know, it is what it is. So
think about all the beautiful foils you'll get to pick up to replace it with.
Yeah,
it's a bunch of new shiny cardboard. It'll get there eventually, but I'm glad that I got Max P closer to the ban Rhystic Study side.
Close. We're not quite there yet.
It's a win for me today.
We're getting
closer.
There. We're getting there. We're getting there. We made a strong argument. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Please, if you have opinions about these things, come on the Win and End Discord, come talk about it, tweet at me. I'm like having these conversations all the time. Tell me I'm an idiot, tell me I'm a genius, whatever. And please like and subscribe to the channel. That helps a lot. And I'll see you next time.